Good morning everyone and welcome to this presentation about the new feature of PHP 8.1. My name is Enrico Zimmer and I'm a principal software engineer at Elastic. I'm the co-founder of the PHP user group of Torino. A few notes about me. I'm a developer since 1996. As I said, I work at Elastic. I am an open source contributor, especially for the PHP community. I was the co-author of some projects like Agility, Expressives and Framework and so on. I'm also a TEDx speaker about programming and international speaker of many PHP conferences mainly. I'm also a teacher at the ETS CCT Piemonte, that is a school here in Torino in Italy. I wrote some books about web programming. This is the latest, is Sviluppare in PHP 7. It's an Italian book and it's about PHP 7. As I said, I'm also the co-founder of PHP user group of Torino. So the PHP user group of Torino is a PUG that was born in 2011, so 10 years ago basically. It's part of the GRUSP association, that is a professional association in Italy about the web developers. We have more than 500 members on Meetup, and also we have also more than 100 people in our mailing list. We try to arrange Meetup approximately every 2 months. During this pandemic period, we did mainly remotely, but yesterday we did in presence. So it was the first in presence presentation, and this is actually the recorded of the presentation. We have a sponsor in Torino, that is the Toolbox coworking. It's a very nice place that offers for free spaces for the meetup. So thank you for the Toolbox. Okay, let's jump to the topics of this presentation, that is PHP 8.1. There are a lot of new features scheduled for the 8.1 release. Some of these features are the enums, and I will talk later about it, the fibers, the never type, the array is a list, this new function to check if a variable is in a list or not. Fsync, fdatasync are two others, function, very useful if you are using, stream, file stream in PHP. And final class constant, so the ability to add final in a constant of classes. Static variables in inheritance methods, and new in initializer. The last one is actually still under discussion, so as not be merged in the 8.1 branch, but I'm sure this will be I'm pretty sure that this will be inserted soon. So before to start the presentation, I would like to show you the schedule of the PHP 8.1 release. So actually today is 24 of June, and today there will be the Alpha 2 version of PHP 8.1. As you can see, the feature freeze is the 20th of July. So that means until this date, should be other feature proposed and merged into the branch. After this date, no more additional features. So we need to wait until the 20th of July to to see what are the other features that will be included. As you can see, there are a lot of beta version scheduled, also a lot of RC release candidate. The general, the GA will be on 25 of November of this year. So this is of course a tentative of schedule, but you know, this is the schedule that the PHP community proposed. So we hope that will be respected. So let's jump to the first topics, the first big feature. In my opinion, this is the most interesting feature in PHP 8.1, that is enums. So what is enums? Enums represents a collection of constant value, and this is the syntax, also how you can you know, specify enum in PHP 8.1. So basically you have the enum, the name, for instance in this case is a currency, and you have curly brackets and the list basically of all the constant value expressed using the case operator. So for instance here we have GBP for the British, you know, currency, and EUR for the euro, currency. So let's try to do something with this enum. So for instance we can create a class product that have a constructor with the three parameters. The first parameter is name, is a string, and it's a private one. So here we are using the feature of 8.0, the promoted parameters constructor basically. So that means if you specify here the type, like private here, basically this will create an internal variable in the class product that is private, that is a string $name. So this is a short way to you know, express um, to define a private property. So you can just specify in the constructor. So as I said, we have three parameters: the name, the amount, that is a float, and the last one is a currency. So as you can see, currency, that is actually enum, is basically like a class. So it's the same. In fact, internally has been you know, implemented using a class. So the currency internally in the PHP engine itself is managed by a special class. Anyway, the syntax is similar to a class, so you specify that the type of the enum here and the variable. And there is just a simple var dump of the currency here. So let's try to instantiate an object of the product. So here I'm creating in $A a new product, passing some value. As you can see, in order to pass enum value, you have to specify you know, using the static syntax, so double dot. So this is similar to a static call, or you know, like a constant actually of a class, because as I said, currency is a special class in the implementation of the PHP engine. And so if you run this code, you basically will execute this var dump, and this var dump will give you this information. So that basically the dollar currency is an enum variable, and this is the value. If you try to pass a string instead of the enum value, a string that is euro here, basically this will give you a fatal error. So this means that it's not possible to instantiate, you know, in this case a product object passing a string. You have to specify explicitly using this syntax for the enum. You can have a value also on enum, that is are called bracket enums. For instance, here you can specify for the GBP case the pound string, the pound symbol, and this actually in enum you can specify as backend enums only string or integer. So you cannot specify here, I don't know, an array or an object. So in this way, basically you have a name and a value. The name is in this case GBP, and the value is the pound symbol. The same for the euro, is the euro symbol. Okay, so let's try to, you know, assign an enum value like euro to a variable dollar currency. How we can access actually the value and the name of the enum. Basically, we can access using a property, because currency is a special class actually. So there are two defined properties that has value and name. So the value is basically the value that we specified here as a string. So in this case, because we use the euro, is the euro symbol, and the name is the name of the constant. The enum offers you some utilities function, like for instance from. So if you use this function in the currency, you basically can say, okay, look, I want to have the enum value of the string euro symbol. So basically this will create the enum currency euro name. So basically you can start from the string, getting back the enum values. And there is another interesting function that is try from. So basically this will try to create a currency enum starting from this string, that is the dollar symbol. And of course dollar is not present in this list, so this try from will return a null value. So this can be very helpful if you need to check if you can try to create enum value starting from a string. Of course, if the string is present as a value in the list of this case, it will basically get the specific element. But if it's not, we will return null. There is another nice function in enum, that is cases, that basically give you the list of all the case, of all the value, of the possible value of enum. In this case, they will return an array, basically, of two elements with two, GBP and euro value. Another very nice feature of enums is the possibility to add a function in the specification. For instance, in this example, we are adding the format function in the currency implementation, in the currency enum. As you can see, this is like specifying a function in a class, basically. So the format here has one parameter that is a float, and it returns a string, basically. So let's see what is in this implementation. We have a match. As you can see, we are using $this, so the instance basically of the currency. So according to this instance, we are basically, this match is also a new feature of PHP 8.0, and is the equivalent of a switch case, but it's more convenient. It's more the syntax is less convoluted. So basically here we are saying, okay, if $this has this value, so if the currency is GBP, so the results will be this string. So we are using basically this string where this value basically is the string, is the value of this case is GBP. So in the curly bracket here, this is the equivalent of the pound symbol, and after we are printing just the floating point with two decimal number, because we are using a sprint f function here. Oh, yeah, this is for GBP. For euro, we need to basically have the numbers and after the symbol, because this is how the euro are represented in Europe. So you have the number and after the symbol. In British, you have the pound and after the number. So it's vice versa, basically. So basically, this format will give you will format the string according to the specific currency. So we can just consume the function as it was a class. So for instance, we can just create a value assigned to a variable, and you can just, as you can see, execute a function passing a floating number. So this basically will format this floating number, adding the pound at the beginning because the value is GBP. So this is the results. So I think this, can be very, very useful if you have, a list of constant, like for instance currency, and you can add, utilities function to perform operation, like in this case formatting a string. You can have also a static function as well in the declaration of the enum. So in this case we are creating a from local function that accepts a string, and according to this string we are just basically giving back the value of the local. So for instance, we are in Netherlands, in time zone in Netherlands they use euro, so they will basically get back a euro value. Italy, the same, euro. In British, in England, there will be the GBP value. So this is a convenient utility that you can have, that we had that in the current implementation. So you can just execute it, specifying a string that is basically the time zone where you want to localize your application, and the currency will be set according to this time zone. In this case, Italy and euro. So $cur will be a enum value, euro, and you can actually access, for instance, the value and getting back the euro symbol. So pretty straightforward, but very, very helpful. Okay, now let's jump to another topics, that is fibers. And this topics has been discussed a lot in the PHP community, and there is also some kind of confusion around this feature. So let's see what fibers is. Fibers basically give you a first try to introduce cooperative multitasking in PHP. So actually a fiber is a code block that maintains its own stack. So the variable and the states that can be started, suspended, or terminated cooperatively by the main code and the fiber. So that means basically the fiber is a class that gives you the possibility to specify a code that you can actually start, stop, terminate, and etc. So let's jump. Let's try to understand what is actually this cooperative multitasking. So in a cooperative multitasking is a way to execute a piece of code scheduling in time, and this is not parallel. So this is very important to understand. So the fibers does not introduce a way to execute parallel code in PHP. Fibers is just a class that gives you the ability to implement by yourself a cooperative multitasking pattern. Typically in a cooperative multitasking, you have just one single CPU. We already know that PHP is not multi-thread, so you have just one thread, one core actually, and the PHP engine is executed just in one core. So that means using the fibers you can have a piece of code, for instance process A. So imagine that process A is a fiber, and you can say at any line in your block code, okay, I suspend here the execution. So let's put is in idle. So that means you say to PHP engine, okay, look, now you can execute whatever code you want. So I'm suspended. So the process B, you can imagine like the main the main application of your PHP, not the fiber. So you can execute actually your application, and at some point you can say, okay, look, now I want to come back to the fibers. So I want to start again the fibers, and actually if you resume the fibers, the state of the fibers is in memory, so they will basically continue the execution when it was stopped. And so the process A, that is the fiber, will be executed again. So basically, as you can see, everything is linear, so there is no parallel execution, but you can actually specify where to stop your code, where to suspend your code, and where to resume your code. So this is different from parallel execution, that is the preemptive mode, where you typically you have two thread or two CPU that where you execute process A and process B in parallel. So this is not the case of the fibers. Fiber is cooperative mode, and you have to do by yourself. I mean, it's not like the coroutine of Go, for instance. It's more low level, in the sense that it's just a class that gives you the possibility to suspend the execution of the class and resume the execution of the class. So if you want to understand better, maybe this diagram can help a little bit. So imagine that you have a sequential execution. So this is normal PHP code, where you have this is basically, this rectangle represents a specific code in your code base. So here basically you have one violet and one orange code, and then another violet. Imagine that we want to use the fiber. So the fiber is basically a class where you put some of the previous code of the sequential code in a fiber, and actually you can suspend in the fiber execution here in green at any time. So you can literally write suspend here at this line, and the PHP will continue the execution of the main application. The point is, the fiber cannot resume by itself. So in the main, you have explicitly say, okay, so please resume the fiber execution. So the fiber will be executed again until you find a suspend, and again suspend will come back to the main flow execution. And if you want to come back to the fiber, you have to resume from the main to the fiber, and the fiber at the end in this case, for instance, it will terminate the execution, so the PHP can terminate the execution of the PHP code. So the fiber is not a way to actually reduce the execution time, because as you can see, the two diagrams here are of the same size. So the height of this execution that represents the execution time is the same. So if you use sequential or if you use fiber. So fiber is not a way to run the code much faster. It's a way to run this piece of code much faster, because for instance, if this violet bar here, in the case of the sequential execution, you need to wait that all the orange, so all the code in the fiber, will be terminated. So there is not possible to execute this piece of code before the end of execution of a sequential code. In the fiber, as you can see here, we can basically move this part of the code in up to the diagram. So that means this code will be executed in the middle of execution of the fiber, using this suspend and resume function. So this is the theory under the concurrent execution. So again, using fiber, you are not executing code in parallel. The fiber and the main execution flow does not happen at the same time, as I mentioned in the previous diagram. It's up to the main execution flow to start a fiber, and when it starts, the fiber is executed exclusively. This means that you cannot execute two fiber at the same time. Only one fiber can be executed. The execution is always linear. There is not possible to execute two parallel fiber at the same time. So as I mentioned, fiber is a class. So this is the specification of all the function. You have the constructor, and inside the constructor you have only one parameter. That is a callable. Sorry. So you pass basically a callable here, and the fiber. This is the code that you want to inject actually in the fiber. And you have this method start to start the execution of a fiber, resume to come back to the execution of a fiber, and so on. You have also two static functions that are suspend and get current. Suspend can be executed inside the code of the fiber to suspend the execution. So as I mentioned, when you run suspend, basically the PHP engine will come back to the main code and will execute the main code until in the main code you have resume call that basically will come back to the fiber and start and continue the execution of the code. Okay, let's see a basic example. So in this example, we are creating an instance of a fiber, and as you can see, we are passing an anonymous function here. Inside this anonymous function, the first things that we do is to suspend the execution of the fiber. And as you can see here, you can also specify a parameter. So this is interesting because this parameter actually is passed to the main execution of PHP. After this suspend, there is just an echo, so a print of a string where we are just printing also the value. The value is the return from the suspend. Okay, this is just a definition of the object $fiber. So as I mentioned, in the main PHP code, you can just start the execution of a fiber using the start function. And this actually will return a value. So let's see what happened here. So start, basically we go inside the fiber, we start the execution. The first line is a suspend. And this string fiber is actually the $value that will be used to suspend the fiber and to return to the main code. So basically, if we run this piece of code, the first echo here will be printed like value from fiber suspending, and the $value will be fiber because fiber is the return, is the parameter that we specify in the suspend. After this print, this echo, we can resume the execution of the fiber passing another parameter. So basically, suspend and resume are functions that allows you to specify a parameter. So it's a way to pass information from the fiber to the main code and from the main code to the fiber. This is very interesting. So basically here in the resume, we are resuming the execution. So basically we are going here at this line because remember the fiber preserve in memory the state of the execution. So, we suspended and now we need to execute the second line that is echo. But in this case, $value will be test because we are passing this parameter from the main code to the fiber. So the next line printed will be value used to resume fiber test because again, we pass a test as parameter in the resume. So as you can see, the fiber is just a way to specify a code with some, breakpoint, I will call it, that are actually defined by suspend, and give you the possibility from the main code to resume the execution according to the stack. So the value of the stack value of the fiber. Oh, let's try to give you maybe a better example. So imagine that we want to implement a progress bar to track the copy of multiple files. So imagine you have 100 files and you want to print a progress bar that say, okay, I copied the first 3 files, the first 10 bytes, and etc. So imagine that we have $files, an array, an associative array where we have the key represents the source of the file, and the value, the destination of the file. So basically here we are saying that we want to copy these 3 files and putting into this 3 folder, destination folder. We can create a fiber object where basically we specify in the constructor an anonymous function passing in this case one parameter that is the array of files. Inside the fiber we have a for each, so we are just looping inside the $files array, and we are using the copy, that is the PHP function to copy a file from the source to the destination. After each copy we suspend the execution of the fiber and we pass as parameter an array that of 2 elements, where the first is the source and the second is the destination. So basically we want to just give back to the main execution flow the information that we copied this source to this destination. So let's see how to use actually this fiber implementation. So we start the execution passing the $files, so the array of basically the file that we want to copy, and we store the return value in a $copied variable. So this $copied will contain an array of source and destination, because if you will go back in the previous slide, when we suspend, so basically this will be the value that we pass to the main execution code, and actually this is the $copied variable. So we set count to 1, we get the total of the files, in this case 3, and we can perform a while loop. As you can see, the condition is not fiber is terminated. Is terminated is another function of the fiber implementation that give you true when the fiber execution is terminated, or false when it's not terminated. Inside this loop, we are just calculating the percentage of the execution. So it's 1 to the total of value, and we are just multiplying by 100 because we want to the percentage value, and we are just printing a string that say, okay, look, we are in this progress and we copied this file to this destination file. We are using here, as you can see, the copied, the first because copied is an array of 2 elements, so the first 0 element is the source and 1 is the $destination. So we are just printing the information what we copied basically. After this, we can resume the execution of the fiber using resume. We are not passing any information here, and basically this will go to the next. If we go back to the next for each value, because we have suspend for each element here. So this basically will go to the next value. We just can increment the count and proceed again with the loop until the fiber is terminated. Long story short, the output of this script will be 3 lines where you have the percentage, where say, okay, look, I have copied the first file to destination A, the second file to destination B, and the last one is the third file to destination C. And after we print completed. So hopefully this example give you a better introduction to the fibers, and also the real use cases, real use cases to use the fiber, because I don't think fiber will be a class feature that will be used by the majority of the PHP developers, because it's very specific to implement cooperative multitasking, but maybe this implementation is something that people can use it. But I expect the usage of fibers more for developers of libraries or frameworks like MP or stuff like that, to be honest. But anyway, you can leverage this example and even come out with better use cases for use fibers. Okay, another feature of PHP 8.1 is the use of the never type. So basically, 8.1 introduced this new return type, never. That is interesting. A function that is declared with the never return type indicates that it will never return a value and always throw an exception or terminate the execution with die or exit. So basically, if you specify in a function the return value never, the function must be die. Die means you have to write exit or die in the function, or even throw an exception. So that means this function will terminate, will halt the execution of the PHP script. So an example, because it's sounds interesting but also a little bit strange. So imagine that you have you want to implement a function to perform an HTTP redirect. In HTML, if you want to write a web application and you need to redirect to another URL, in PHP, as you know, you can use the header function to specify the location and the value for the redirect. But when you specify this, you have to exit the execution. Otherwise, the redirect will not be performed. So imagine that you put this in a function that is redirect, and you specify never as a return type here, because as you can see, we have exit inside the function. So basically when you invoke the redirect function, the code will be terminated. In this example, if we try to recall or do a redirect using this string test, basically the second line, the echo, will never be executed. Okay, so never means this. So imagine that you have the same example, but you forgot to write exit in the function redirect, and you execute the redirect here. The PHP will throw a fatal error saying, you said, okay, look, you write that the redirect return type is never, but you didn't terminate the execution in the function. So you cannot use never here. If you want to use never, you have to use exit, die, or throw an exception here. So it's a way to remember that if you write never here, you are assuming that the redirect function will terminate the execution. So you are putting more constraint actually in your code using the never type, and this can be helpful for prevent mistake like this. So you forgot, for instance, to write exit in one redirect function. So I think this never can have interesting use case as well. Another feature that will be introduced with PHP 8.1 is the array is list. So this is very simple actually, but very convenient function. Basically, the arrays list returns true or false, depending if the parameter that you are, the variable that you are passing is a sequential array or not. Where sequential array means sequential where the index are integer starting from 0. So let's give you some example. Imagine that you have a dollar array with 3 elements, this 3 integer value. If you pass it to arrays list, this will be true because this is actually a list of value. Second example, you are creating an array using a associative array, but the key are numbers starting from 0, so 0, 1. So this is equivalent to write dollar array equal a comma b. Is the same basically. Also, if you pass it to arrays list, it will be true. If you use an associative array like this, where the key are just string, this is of course not a list, so arrays list will return false. And also, this is interesting, the last example. If you try to create a list, because this is using a index so this is an associative array where the key are the numbers. So the first is 0, but the second element has index 2 and not 1. So for arrays list, this will be false because basically this is not a list. So there is an empty element because the index 1 is not present in the list. So imagine that you created an array and you do an unset, for instance, of an element. You are basically creating a hole in the array, and so this is not a sequential value, a list basically. So that's why we will return false. So I think this function arrays list can be useful, for instance, to check if an array is associative array or not, for instance. But remember what means list for PHP. For this function, a list is a sequential integer starting from 0, the index. So as the last example show, you need to be careful. 8.1 introduce also two nice features if you are using streaming of file that are fsync and fdatasync. So fsync basically synchronize the change to the file, including its metadata. It's similar to the flush, is another function of PHP that basically give you the possibility to to write the buffer of the stream into a file to be sure that the memory, the buffer is not in the memory but is stored in the file. And actually this fsync function can be useful in application that consistent and persistent storage is important. So imagine that you are working on I don't know, a stream file, and you want to be sure that the buffer that you have in memory is stored in the file system. You can use fsync to be sure that from the fsync all the data are written in the file system and not in the buffer. Fdatasync is similar to fsync, and but it does not synchronize also the metadata, because when you write to the file in the file system, this depending on the operating system, for instance in Linux you have not just the data but also the metadata that are I don't know, the size of the file, the type of the file, this kind of information. So for instance in Windows there is not actually concept of metadata, and the fdatasync is basically an alias to the fsync. In POSIX system, like for instance Linux, you have these differences between metadata, and so fdatasync and fsync will perform differently. Just a simple example: imagine that you want to open a file, to create actually a file, to write in a file. You want to write these 3 lines here, this fwrite, these 3 fwrite, and you want to be sure that this actually line are stored in the file system. You can just invoke the fsync to the handler, to the resource $fh, and after you can close the file, because if you don't write this, basically you are not sure that the fwrite are present in the file system at this time. So fsync basically guarantee that everything in the buffer is written in the file. Final class constant. As I mentioned, in PHP 8.1 you can define final as a constant of a class. So imagine that you have this class universe, you have this constant, this speed of light. With this value you can specify final. So basically if you specify final, as you know, also as a class or a function, if you extend the class you can basically not change the value of the property, the function. The same for the constant. So imagine that you have this ring space class that extend the universe, the previous class, and if you try to override the constant here, PHP will generate a fatal error saying that the constant speed of light cannot override final constant of the universe, basically. Just a note, this feature is not available in 8.1 alpha 1, but it will be in the next alpha. Another nice feature is a new initializers, and this is actually still under discussion, so it's not present in the alpha release of PHP 8.1, and I hope this will be added soon because it's very interesting. So in PHP 8.0, if you need to have default value for object in the constructor, the only way to do is basically to pass the logger, so the type of the object that you want, with the question mark to have a null value. So you can pass also new value, and you can have a default null value here. And inside the constructor, you need to check if the logger, using the collage operator, if the logger is null, basically, okay, I will generate a new object of some type, for instance, new logger. If it's not null logger, okay, I will get the value and I pass it to the logger. So that's the only way to have default object value in constructor using PHP 8.0. In 8.1, you will have the possibility to specify the default as a new logger. So basically this means if you don't pass nothing here in the logger, it will basically create a default value as an object itself. So the new, basically you can specify the new directly in the specification of the parameter, and you will save this line basically. The new initializer is not just about the constructor example. There are other nice use cases. For instance, imagine that you want to have a default value for a static variable inside a function. You can specify actually with PHP 8.1, you can have a new counter as a default value. But not only, you can have also constant. Imagine that you have a class, for instance, a repository where you create a constant value db that is an instance of another class specifying some parameter. I'm using also the feature of named parameters. So I think new initializer will be a very nice feature, and I really hope this will be merged soon. Last, in this presentation, we have static variables in inheritance methods. This is kind of a fix actually that will be in PHP 8.1. So imagine that you have a class A where you have a static function, and inside this static function you have a static variable $e that is equal to 0, and we are just incrementing basically this static variable each time someone call the counter. We have another class B that extend A, and we just we are just printing 4 times the value of the counter. So we are invoking for 2 times the counter in the class A and 2 times in the class B. If you are using PHP 8.0 or less, the value here will be 1, 2, 1, 2. So basically, each time you try to access the static variable from an extended class, in this case B, the static variable will be reset again to 0. And this is a strange behavior because I expect that static value will be only one instance of a static variable. So even if I am extending a class, this should be 3 and 4, because we are counting, we are executing 4 times the function counter. So I expect to have 1, 2, 3, 4. And in fact, in PHP 8.1 they fixed this behavior, and 8.1 the results will be 1, 2, 3, 4. So the static variable in inheritance method is just a fix of the expected behavior. Okay, I finished my presentation. In the slides you can find the reference that I used for the PHP 8.1. As I mentioned, today is 24th of June. So we are not still in the feature freeze. So I expect more feature will be added to the 8.1 feature. But I'm very excited to work on this feature at the end of November. So thank you very much for attending this presentation. If you want to find me on Twitter, this is my nickname on Twitter. If you want to follow the agenda of the PHP user group of Torino, we have a meetup here, and thank you again for your attention.